Welcome into the show. Christian O'Jackson here with Ryan Gilbert of GoPowerCat.com. He is our source for Kansas State. You ready to talk Wildcats today? Thanks for coming on, Ryan.
Appreciate it, Kristen. It's been a while. Good to talk with you again, though, for sure.
So, Kansas State's Elite Eight run 2 years ago is one of my favorites in recent memory. Just so fun. Home runs in the portal, exciting basketball. It was just awesome. So, I wanted to give Jerome Tang the benefit of the doubt because we know what he can do defensively, coaching, and there's exciting players that have came in the last 2 years. Just things haven't fully clicked, and the Big 12 is obviously a really good conference. But I want to start off by asking you: do you think Jerome Tang learned any lessons from the failures is a strong word, but from the shortcomings of the last years, and kind of what was that approach to the portal this season, based on kind of what happened the last 2 years?
Yeah, I don't know about year number 2, maybe as much as year number 3. Jerome Tang last year, he's mentioned it countless times that he wasn't the best version of himself, and absolutely did learn a lot from the struggles of that team, and now dealing with players getting paid and maybe expecting them to be professionals. Well, at the end of the day, Christian, you're dealing with still young men, college students that are going to need mentoring and guidance, even though they're getting paid, oftentimes millions of dollars. So I think roster construction wise, I think Jerome Tang and his staff were cognizant of maybe some of the, I don't know what I'll call them, weaknesses, but issues that Kansas State's team had last year. Did a good job of trying to eradicate those. And by all accounts, we're hearing great things about PJ Haggerty. I'm sure we'll get into him and some of the guys just off the court, though. Christian, let's be honest, that had to be a point of emphasis for this staff here in this offseason, building a roster after you had a team that, I don't know if you have this noted down or remember this, that won 6 games in a row in Big 12 play last year against Iowa State on the road, Arizona, KU, one of the best winning streaks in the country at that time. They were playing some really good basketball. So for that team to not have it click together for an entire season, clearly there were some problems there.
Yeah, that was one of the most interesting storylines of kind of the middle part of conference play. They lost 6, they won 6, they lost 4, and but after that winning streak, it wasn't like it was bad the rest of the way. I mean, they played good ball, much better ball, I guess, than earlier on. Before we get into this roster, I want to talk the coaching shift. So I don't know how to say his name. Ulrich Maligi leaves. He was the associate head coach last year, and you bring in Matthew Driscoll from North Florida, who, that team was number 1 in 3-point attempt rate the past 2 seasons. I assume that could be a hint of what's to come offensively this season. Can you kind of talk me through that staff change and any other staff changes that might have happened?
By all accounts, it is the keys are in Matthew Driscoll's hands for the offense, right? And K-State fans, Jerome Tang maybe isn't the most popular man in Manhattan after the way the last 2 seasons have gone. Everybody that I've talked to, whether that's somebody having a beer at the bar or a media member, everybody is excited for Driscoll. And Jerome Tang had a press conference a couple days back, and I think he just seems maybe more comfortable, more confident, back to maybe his former self, like you mentioned, the Elite Eight run. And I think he's got a good group of dudes with him, and that just makes your job as a coach so much easier. But yeah, Driscoll's an energetic guy. We've seen clips of him on social media, just in practice and stuff. He's bringing the vibes that this team needs. And a couple other guys came in. Driscoll's, it's actually his son, Chase Driscoll, is a lower assistant on the staff, and then Bill Peterson brought in as well. With all due respect, right, not as important the role of an associate head coach that Matthew Driscoll has. That's going to be a very important piece to maybe turning things around in Manhattan. And so everybody's excited for Driscoll. You look at his resume, maybe not the best in terms of wins and losses, but he is a very, very tenured coach. Bill Peterson, I mean, he's been NBA, G League, development, college. I mean, he is assistant head coach. He's done everything as a coach. And so you've got some more versatility that's been brought onto the staff. So, props to Jerome Tang for, eyeing some weaknesses, so to speak, and, Uric Malagi, I kind of regret not asking Tang in the recent presser what needs to maybe be filled without Uric gone from last year, but I didn't want it to come across as I was trying to down Driscoll or anything like that. So I didn't. But yeah, Uric was a big defense guy. And now you bring in your associate head coach as an offensive guy. So there's going to be differences there. I'm sure there's some adjustments that might need to be made. But everybody is Driscoll's checked all the boxes to this point in Manhattan.
I know the audience probably wants me to get into the roster right now, but one more thing with Driscoll. 15 years in North Florida. How did Tang kind of prime away? Are they long-time friends, or was he kind of just like, I need an offensive mind, like let me go hit up some people and see what kind of mid-major coach would potentially want to be a number 2 at a Big 12 school instead of a number 1. Also, shout out to Driscoll for developing Chaz Lanier over at Tennessee.
Right.
And then Noah Horkler played at Providence. I know North Florida's had some good players under him for sure.
To answer your question, though, both. They've known each other. It's Matthew Driscoll is one of Tang's kids' godfather. I think so. That, you know what I mean. There's Baylor connections there, and so they've known each other forever. So, yes, this is a guy that Tang is very familiar with, but B, he does bring a lot to the K-State's offense. So that was your question, right?
Yeah. Because Texas Tech also brought in Jeff Linder from Wyoming a year ago. I just think it's an interesting strategy, and also if I'm a mid-major coach, I kind of like the idea of being a number 2 at a power conference, a little less out of the spotlight. You're getting probably paid more.
Sorry, I knew there was something else I wanted to say. The changes in college basketball, right? For an older coach, maybe a more traditional coach like Driscoll, it's tough. It's tougher to win when you're not in the Big 12 or at a power conference school. Mm-hmm. And so not that Driscoll was eager to leave, but to come to Manhattan and have the facilities and NIL and all the available resources that Kansas State has certainly made it an attractive spot for him to come to.
All right, into this roster, got to start with PJ Haggerty, 22-6-4, 2 steals a game at Memphis, one of my favorite players in the country to watch. So good at getting the free throw line, so good at creating his own shot, plays so hard. I know there was some drama about the money situation. I don't know whether it was Tennessee got involved or staying at Memphis, but I know this man's getting a lot of money, but I think he's a great investment. So tell me what the expectations are for PJ Haggerty to come in here, and this could be a potential first-team All-American, right?
Could be, if history repeats itself, absolutely. But, Marquise Noel, I love bringing him up because in year number 2, Tyler Perry was brought in, and a lot of people just assumed he would be the next Marquise Noel. Or last year, Coleman Hawkins, I know a different position, but, you're paying this guy this and this in NIL, he's going to be a superstar. And Doug McDaniel, same thing. Kansas State hasn't had that Marquise Noel come back and be the dude on and off the court. And PJ Haggerty is going to be that dude. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the season he goes down as a better player than Marquise Noel was at Kansas State. And that is a heck of a statement. And when you look at the Elite 8 run, when what Noel did, Haggerty's got a chance to be special. But of course, Marquise Noel was not who he was without Keontae Johnson. And so somebody is going to have to maybe step up and be Haggerty's right-hand man in this locker room and on the court if K-State really wants to be an elite team in 2025-26. And I'll keep it at that, though, Christian. Like, I think everybody listening, even if you're not a K-State fan, you're a casual college basketball fan. Everybody knows the impact that Haggerty is going to have on any team he plays on. He's that special.
The next guy that comes to mind when I'm looking at this roster has to be Nate Johnson, coming over from Akron, MAC Player of the Year and Defensive Player of the Year. 6'3" guard, 14, 5-4. Not much of a three-point shooter, 30%. But I assume as someone who didn't watch a lot of Akron that efficiency could be correlated to the fact that he was kind of the man there and maybe had to take a lot of shots just being around less talent than he is now. So what are the expectations for Nate Johnson kind of playing off PJ Haggerty and potentially being that number 2 guy?
For me personally, I'm very excited about Nate Johnson. And you mentioned it. His defense is a non-negotiable, right? And he's going to be, I guess Jerome Tang mentioned in his press conference recently that maybe he wants him to be going 100 miles an hour every day rather than going 95 here or whatever. Like, I guess there's maybe a little bit more left in the tank in practice in that facility, but when you just look at what he's done, of course, in his collegiate career, man, that is the type of player that you need to bring into your program after you've missed the NCAA tournament for the last couple of years. And, Nate Johnson is, regardless of what he does offensively, that defense is going to be big. Brendan Hazen was a 3-point shooter last year, and they tried to turn him into more offensively, but at the end of the day, that was kind of what he was. Defense was not where his bread got buttered. I could go down the line of Doug McDaniel's buy-in defensively was bad, very bad at times last year. And we don't even need to scratch the surface on some of the problems that McDaniel and the team had last year, but defense was a problem for a good chunk of the year. Nate Johnson, I think, is a guy that can absolutely set the standard, set the tone for how it's supposed to be done on the defensive end, because that's where if you play defense, Jerome Tang's going to love you.
So Tyreek Smith's waiver got denied. There's no chance that is all hope lost there? Is there any chance that he potentially plays?
He's done. He's no more practicing, none of that. So I know they're frustrated with how that kind of transpired, and maybe a lack of communication with the NCAA. But yeah, that ship has sailed.
Kamari McGriff, the other big, came in from UNC Wilmington, redshirt senior. Only played 19 minutes a game. Didn't watch much UNC Wilmington last year. I know they gave Texas Tech a good battle in the tournament, but tell me about Kamari McGriff. Is he going to start on this team? And I assume if Jerome Tang brought this guy from UNC Wilmington, he must be a really good defender, because that's what he's looking for at the 5 spot, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure if he'll start or not. I think there's a good, decent chance that he will, but K-State's going to have to play a little bit smaller this year, and McGriff's a great example of it. If he is your 5, he's not a true Shaq in the paint. He's the exact opposite. But K-State can work around that. I love bringing this up, against Oscar Tshiebwe in the NCAA tournament when they reached the Elite 8, K-State Oscar Tshiebwe got his. He had like a 30-point, 20-rebound type game. But K-State found ways to beat Kentucky in other different ways. And that's maybe how things are going to have to go with I don't want to say he's undersized, but Kamari McGriff isn't huge. And so K-State can, Jerome Tang has proven he can navigate a team without maybe having the best size on his roster. But you mentioned the NCAA tournament, man. I mentioned, Nate Johnson and his defense. Kamari McGriff is another guy here just with the NCAA tournament experience. You look at Doug McDaniel, Max Jones, CJ Jones, maybe there was one more. I know those 3 guys for certain came from sub 500 programs before coming to Kansas State. You can't tell me that doesn't have a huge impact on just the DNA, right? Winning, right. Knowing how to win and being in a winning locker room and going to the big dance. K-State didn't have enough of that last year, and now you've brought some more flavor in with that, and obviously McGriff's a good example.
Speaking of transfer team success, Monmouth was pretty bad last year, but Abdi Bashir was a bright spot, kind of had the keys, 20 points a game, took 10 threes a game, made him at a 38% clip. I know he's very thin, so defensively making the jump to the Big 12 is kind of the first thought that comes to mind, but he is a sniper, right? What have you been kind of hearing about his integration into this team?
Yeah, I wouldn't call him a carbon copy of Marquise Noel. I love how we just keep bringing back old comparisons of stuff, but that could be the type of player that flourishes in a Jerome Tang system. Just let you go play. You've got the green light. I trust you. You're my guard. Bashir could be that guy. I'm not sure if he'll start. We'll see. I don't think I think PJ Haggerty's a lock. I assume Nate Johnson will get in there, but Bashir's maybe first off the bench or starting, but defensively, his metrics, he was one of the worst defenders in college basketball last season. So if you want to get on the court consistently, the buy-in and just the overall performance execution on defense for Bashir has to be a lot better. But that's a guy that can put the ball through the net in many different ways.
Monmouth was 13-20, one of the 293rd as a team defensively. And when you're tasked with so much offensively on a bad team, can only think mentally how, you know what I'm saying? How much can you really
Yeah.
get defensively? So even if he's not a talented defender, I'd like to think that Tang is able to get the absolute most possible out of him, especially in an environment around guys where, it's just unacceptable if you're not giving that full effort. Another transfer coming in, big Marcus Johnson from Bowling Green, productive there. Big dude, got some buzz online for when they played Michigan State. They almost won at the Breslin Center. Marcus Johnson was hooping. Like a big dude who likes to put the ball on the floor and kind of create for himself. But tell me more about Marcus Johnson. That's kind of all I have on him.
Marcus Johnson, if there was one candidate to be the fan favorite, look at him. That is all you need to know. And the way he plays, Marcus Johnson's a versatile player who can, Tang mentioned him as a guy that I asked him the other day who could maybe be an X factor. Like, he's got the potential not to be the star of the team, but I think if K-State, if you're down by a couple points and you need a bucket at home and you need to get the crowd back into it, who better than Marcus Johnson to give you that spark off the bench? I don't think he's for starting minutes, but if he can get in the rotation and find his little role, I think he can be a big time piece for this team.
Before I get into these European guys who I don't know much about, I want to touch on a couple of the returners, CJ Jones and David Castillo. I remember you hyped up David a lot when we were on this call last year, and he didn't super hit those expectations, but I assume if Tang was able to retain him, there's got to be some belief in here that he can become the player that you were speaking of last year. So kind of what are expectations for David? And then CJ, I know, is a good three-point shooter who didn't shoot it great last year. So do you think those guys can kind of turn it around here?
Yeah, David would tell you that last year was a disappointment. And this was the first time really in his life where he faced I don't want to call it adversity, but this was the first time in his life where he wasn't the guy. At Bartlesville, he was winning gold medals with Team USA. Everything was just clicking for him. And then he had a little bit of a ankle or foot injury. Was that his junior year? So his senior year was kind of, I don't want to say iffy, but his confidence needs to get back up, right? He's capable of being a damn good player, but nobody can deny the fact that he was not good last year for Kansas State. Jerome Tang in the offseason was raving about having him on the floor with a minute left on the road in the Big 12 because he has that much confidence in him. We didn't see that. Tang would tell you that. I'm sure David Castillo would tell you that. But if you bring a guy back in today's day and age in college basketball, that means you're on a pretty good page with, between coach and player. So I still have high hopes for Castillo. I'm not going to write him off after, just 1 year. Clint Stewart, his former high school coach, is a contributor here on Go Power Cat with us. And so, I feel very good about his nest and the support system that he's got to take that step and return to being a prominent player that he's used to being in his basketball career. So I'm not hitting the panic button yet on Castillo. With regard to CJ Jones, though, some weren't overly pleased with K-State bringing him back, and Jerome Tang actually mentioned that he was a little hesitant to bring him back, but because he entered the portal, Christian, and then
right.
withdrew and came out. So you don't see that hardly ever. It was really unique, but I say this: if CJ Jones is seeing the floor, then he took a step forward. That's a good thing. He's a better player than he was last year. If he's not seeing the floor, then it really doesn't matter. Other players on the roster kind of beat him out. But I think there's a deep enough roster to where either way, you're not too concerned with what happens with CJ Jones. You know who he is. If Tang wants to bring him back, he's obviously not a bad presence in your locker room. He's actually, was he former high school teammates with Buddy Rich, or they went to the same high school? Buddy Rich is gone. CJ Jones is still here. So Tang wanted at the end of the day, wanted to keep CJ Jones around.
So this is a new thing for me as I prepare for college basketball seasons. It's hard for me to keep up with all of the incoming European guys. Sometimes they're coming in, they're ready to play, they're going to start. Sometimes they're projects. So Andre Kostic, Elias Rapike, and what was the third name? Doreen Buka.
Yes.
What's the word? Tell me what to expect from these guys.
It's interesting, man. This is the new way. I don't know if this will be a year in and year out, but this is college basketball now, or at least K-State basketball, going out and getting and even Moby Ike Garuka, he's Irish, and then Stephen Osei, he's going to be a redshirt from JUCO. He's Canadian, and so Tang, to his credit, to his staff's credit, what happened the last 2 years resulted in a non-NCAA tournament season. So I commend them for trying something new and going after some of these overseas players. But Kostic is certainly the most marquee name, but I think his and if you look it up, he's got NBA draft stock potential, like potential lottery pick. Some people say so.
Oh
I
wow.
know when K-State staff was going overseas to look at him, like there were NBA teams there looking at him as well. So that being said, though, that this is more based off of potential rather than immediate readiness right now. So I'm not sure. Like again, if Kostic starts, wouldn't be surprised. But if he's coming off the bench as the sixth man, again, wouldn't be surprised with that either. I think Bashir and Kostic might be battling for minutes or starting minutes for K-State. But he's a sharpshooter. But again, there is going to need to be some. I wouldn't call it maturing, but on court maturity, right? Learning how to play with, in the Big 12. So Kostic has obviously got a lot of potential, but he's got his NBA glamour for what he can maybe do in the future rather than the present right now. Elias, you mentioned him. I think he's kind of the jack of all trades for this team. Bigger player, probably is going to, start at the 4, I would assume, for the Wildcats. Good vision, can pass, defend. He can kind of check all those Jerome Tang boxes that he wants out of his players. And then Buka, he's 8'4". He's just a monster, right? That's the framework is there, and for a player like that, you can work with him and do a lot of things in terms of developing. So, again, is McGriff going to earn those minutes at the 5, or does Tang want to use some of that size with Buka and play bigger? But those, the 3 overseas guys, Buka was added a lot later. He was added just about a month ago from now. So I wouldn't say he's jumping on a moving train, but he's going to have a lot of, I think Tang mentioned this with one of the freshmen, Xavier Wilson, like just an open fire hose of information constantly coming at him. I'm sure Buka's facing that as well. So just the acclimation and adjustment will be key for obviously Buka, but all 3 of these foreign international players to just get used to college basketball, let alone life in America, life in a college town. It's a lot different. But Tang, I will say this, is very pleased with their approach to the game because they have been getting paid overseas and they are much more professional than maybe a young 18-year-old who's getting his $1 million in NIL and doesn't know how to maybe handle that or keep the intensity up all the way. Tang has been very pleased with those international guys and their mature approach to just being a paid athlete, so to speak.
It's going to be interesting to see how these pieces fit together. A lot of new guys in Manhattan, and that's kind of what this era of college basketball is bringing. I feel like with Tang, we can kind of expect that defense, even if there's maybe a little bit of questions of just the size in the front court. 36th, 25th, 27th in KenPom defense the last 3 years, and then the last 2 seasons offensively, 139th and 125th. You'd like to think with Driscoll and Haggerty that kind of sets a floor for how good this offense can be, but I guess is there one kind of main thing that, whether it's Haggerty's leadership to kind of figuring out how these pieces fit together, that's kind of in your brain of kind of just the X factor for how the season goes?
Well, everybody does have to gel together and just blend together, and there is no way you can put your finger on that, and there's no way to truly know how 5 guys are going to just the chemistry of guys on the court together is going to play out until they're on the court. But last year's squad had a number of issues. They were able to get it together for that 6-game winning streak in Big 12 play, but overall, they just didn't play well together, right? Now, it's not about getting everybody to play up to their full potential every game. It's this guy does this guy does that, rebounding, this guy defense, shots. It's all a big kind of formula that needs to come together. And I was wrong. I assume I told you K-State would be an NCAA tournament team last year. the year before, we kind of thought the same thing. And I believe Kansas State had the talent. I believe Kansas State had a number of things going for its team. It just didn't work together. So, like, I know that's kind of a cop-out answer to just say, it needs to work. But, like, these players on the court need to be good playing with each other. Off the court, they have to like each other. They should want to hang out and play Xbox with each other as well. So, gelling is the biggest really key for this team, I think.
Interesting. I'm excited to watch. I'm going to be tuned in because I like watching Jerome Tang teams guard, and I like to watch PJ Haggerty play. So I'm excited to see how those pieces do gel. So, Brian, thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure to talk Kansas State.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you as always.